Now, as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" For as the lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. But as the days of Noah were, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and did not know until the flood came and took them all away, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. In part 1 of this series, we learned that the word coming, used 4 different times in Matthew, chapter 24, is found just 24 times in the King James New Testament, and means presence. Vine's Expository Dictionary states that this word denotes both an arrival and a consequent presence with. Perhaps I'm wrong in my assessment, but an arrival and consequent presence with do not indicate a coming in either sense, but instead refer to the actual presence of someone who has already arrived. Interestingly enough, in the Jonathan Mitchell New Testament, the sign of your coming is rendered, the sign pertaining to your presence. In Matthew 24:27, as well as 24:37 and 39, coming is rendered presence each time. Regarding the days of Noah in Matthew 24:37, Jonathan Mitchell renders it, "For you see, even as it was in the days of Noah, thus will progressively be the presence of the Son of the Man." In none of these references is a future event and arrival suggested. Instead, it suggests the ongoing presence of the Son of Man. If this is true, what would this mean? In part 1, I stated that the most obvious characteristic of the phrase Son of Man would be its reference to the Lord's humanity as opposed to his divinity. I must stay with this line of thinking and bring it to the following. Inasmuch then as the children have partaken of flesh and blood, he himself likewise shared in the same, that through death he might destroy him who had the power of death, that is, the devil, and release those who through fear of death were all their lifetime subject to bondage. Flesh and blood. Does this not speak of his humanity? And our phrase, that through death? In our minds, we might wish to immediately go to his crucifixion, but might it be more appropriate to say that through death incorporated the entire time he was flesh and blood while here on earth? That being said, allow me to share the following with you from the article, "Why Did Christ Die?" by Arthur Adams. In the 4th chapter of Ephesians, there is set forth that awful descent of Christ into the lower parts of the earth. Verse 9, preparatory to his ascension far above all heavens, that he might fill all things. Verse 10. He who was in the form of God made himself of no reputation. Notice the descent, step by step, and took upon him the form of a servant, and was made in the likeness of men, and being found in fashion as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. Behold, how low he stooped. Why was it? This is a great question. To learn why God does a thing is to learn God's thoughts. This great humiliation of Christ was God's work. God was in Christ reconciling the world unto himself. What was the special purpose of this part of the plan? The death of Christ. We should first determine what the death of Christ was. It has already been shown in this paper that Christ's incarnation was his real death, that when he entered into this fallen state, he entered into a condition of death, and was in that condition all the time he tabernacled in the flesh, that is, from his birth to his resurrection. When I speak then of the death of Christ, I do not mean his physical death on the cross, but his real death while he was in this fallen state. Friend, might this be enough to establish the understanding that his identity as Son of Man speaks to the death of the cross? that when he entered into this fallen state, he entered into a condition of death, and was in that condition all the time. He tabernacled in the flesh, that is, from his birth to his resurrection. So what then might be the sign of his presence as Son of Man? Our word sign is defined as an indication. So what might be an indication of his presence as Son of Man? Could it be this message of the cross that he exemplified by his birth, life, death, and resurrection? Might this also correlate with the sign of the prophet Jonah, which Jesus spoke of in Matthew 12:39 and 40? And what is the message of the cross? It's found in the following words from Christ. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "If anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what profit is it to a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? For the Son of Man will come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and then he will reward each according to his works." Here we find what is meant by the cross. It is a message of self-denial, of losing our lives for his sake, a message of humility and surrender. When the Lord's disciples asked him, "What will be the sign of your presence and of the end of the age?" they were not asking about a coming far in the future somewhere. Rather, they were asking about the existing and current age, which was about to come to an end through his death and resurrection. Think about it. Did not the Lord's birth, life, ministry, death, and resurrection begin a new age, one different than what the Jews and Israel had known for centuries? Was there not a transition from the old covenant to the new, from the strict regulations and rituals of the law to the spiritual nature of said law, which is love? Would the Lord not have provoked these questions when he spoke about the destruction of the temple of God, which would have been indicative of this significant change? In our next video study, we will continue our examination of the coming of the Son of Man,